Here's a sneak peek from today's episode.
There was a really great idea a couple of years ago for a gun violence, anti-gun violence group, where they invited some well-known gun advocates to speak to a graduating class, and essentially really amazing stunt the way they did it. They had them, essentially do a practice run, but they were filming that, and that was going to become the actual piece of communication. And so you had these well-known gun advocates speaking to over 3,000 empty seats at a graduation that I think it was 3,044 students would not be graduating that year due to gun violence. Super powerful. And obviously, I'm not saying you can't come up with that idea if you don't know the data point, but I guarantee you that the data points really do help unlock. And even the more specific they can get, that can actually contribute to a stronger insight.
Welcome to the Content Amplified podcast, brought to you by Masset. Our goal is to help you get more from your marketing content. Each episode is a 10 to 15 minute interview with industry experts that share amazing insights to help you squeeze as much juice from your content as you possibly can. Here's today's interview.
Welcome back to another episode of Content Amplified. Today I'm joined by Mark. Mark, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Ben. Great to be here.
This is going to be a fun subject. This is something that we haven't really talked a ton about in the past, and I don't know why. I think it's super impactful for marketers and anyone inside of the content creation or creative process. But before we dive into the subject, let's get to know you a little bit. What do you love about content and marketing is a question we'd love to ask, and then kind of catch us up on your career and experience.
Oh, thanks. What I love about content and marketing and advertising in the business is, to me, when you do it well, you can actually essentially contribute to pop culture. I've always been a really big fan of, just seeing work go out into the world, seeing how people react to it. And there's nothing better when, you see people, quoting something from a line that might have been in a commercial that you helped write, or, seeing someone, take like a poster you may have made and, keep that up on their wall, for years and years. So I think there's just things like that to me, I love the fact that you can actually use culture to help, create an outcome. I've always tried to do that, for the most positive reasons. I recently worked at Impossible Foods, where, obviously the main goal of that company, it makes plant-based meat, is to benefit the planet. And to me, that was a really great experience. And, I think that's what I love about this business.
Love it. That's so cool. Yeah, I can think about as a kid, looking at magazines and ripping out certain advertisements. And at the time, I didn't even realize they're an advertisement. It was just my favorite, sports athlete or favorite brand or something like that. And I can remember getting my push pin and putting it in the wall and setting my mother, because the wall had holes in it everywhere and all that kind of fun stuff. But I do agree. I love that. That's such a cool perspective on content and marketing. So Mark, today what we're going to talk about is data and creativity, really how they go hand in hand and how they can impact one another. I think sometimes we think these are kind of on polar opposite spectrums when it comes to data and creativity. You don't want one to influence or hurt the other in any way, shape, or form. But really, you've got this cool understanding of where data can impact the creative process. So to kick things off, first and foremost, at what stages of the journey when people are building out creative, can data really make an impact and improve that creativity?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, for me, in my experience, it's really been through every stage of the process of creating work in marketing. So that would be any data and information that leads up to a really strong, focused creative brief. Every piece of effective creative, for the most part, really needs, a really narrow focus. And, we have a saying that, you get garbage in, you'll get garbage out. And so if you want to be all things to all people, we've all seen work like that. It's the kind of stuff that you might remember a jingle because you've heard it 1,000 times, but it's a pretty forgettable piece of creative that doesn't necessarily make you feel anything. And so I do think certainly at the, strategic brief stage, data is, really, really key. And, hopefully leads to some major insights. Like there's a great example from an agency I used to work for before my time, but Goodby Silverstein and partners in San Francisco famously developed what they called the deprivation strategy for milk, where they found out when they did the Got Milk work that people really wanted milk the most when they didn't have it. And that led to just so many great solutions, and years of great creative, for the California Milk Processors Board.
So when you're looking at the creative brief, and I love that example because I have seen countless ads of that. I feel like it's a campaign that should come back. I think it's cool. When you're looking at the brief stage, how are you collecting the data points? Where are you pulling them from? Where are they really the most helpful? I can imagine it's really varied across the different circumstances and businesses and use cases, but maybe just like some thoughts and ideas about what data is really impactful to help in that strategic brief process.
Yeah, again, great question. And for me, I have a pretty wide range of experience on both the ad agency side, but also within brands, specifically Impossible Foods and Verizon before that. On the agency side, you essentially really lean on your strategic account planning partner. That is someone within the agency who is essentially working with the client, the marketers on the client side, to do things like run focus groups, glean information that way. But, especially now through social media, there's so much information that's available just like at your fingertips where you can just be, look it up, just see what people are talking about in certain groups, see what a pain point is. Is the project you're working on, the product that you're working on going to maybe help solve one of those pain points? So I think it's really like, don't ignore the data, like get it wherever you can get it from, but just, I think the important thing is to align on the piece that unlocks the best insight, and the thing that's going to be a really fruitful area for people, to come up with creative solutions to. So, that's certainly easier said than done. A lot of people just want to please everyone. And they might say, oh, well, if we do this, we're going to leave all these people behind. But you're like, yeah, but look at this other data point leads to this insight that might unlock what we would call like, brand evangelists. That term's been thrown around a lot, but like people who are really going to get behind your brand, be enthusiastic about it, even help spread the word, and maybe even like spend more money on it more frequently.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting, I want to call out something. You have mentioned data leading to insights at least 3 times in this conversation already. So when you look at it, it sounds like the whole point of data collection is to come up with a unique insight. And it sounds like that insight is really what fuels the creative process. Is that kind of what you're getting at and how that works?
I absolutely think so. And I think that, that gets us to the next stage that I was going to mention about, where data kind of comes in, which is the developing of the creative solution. It's never just one idea. We know every problem has many, many answers. And ideally, you're, throwing a bunch of stuff at the wall, seeing what's going to be the most compelling, and you're going to narrow in on a few and then see which ones we can develop even further to hone in on and solve the problem the best. And I think, for me, if it's just a data point that you're going to mention, it can be pretty forgettable. We've seen a lot of work like that where it's just going to talk, like typically public service announcements really lean into data points. Now, the great ones, the ones that truly like change the world and really kind of hit you like a gut punch, those data points are usually visualized in a very different way. So like a really great example was the Truth campaign, anti-tobacco, anti-smoking. There was a really memorable solution there where they had a bunch of teens unload a truck with body bags, and they stacked 1,200 body bags in front of major tobacco company's office in a city and filmed the whole thing. It's obviously, a choreographed stunt, but they had to blur out faces because the people that they were showing who worked at the company looking out the windows were like, what the hell is this? And that ended with the fact that 1,200 people die every day from smoking. And again, if I just told you that, it's a compelling fact because it's a lot of people. But at the same time, the way they did it is what makes me remember that forever. Similarly, there was a really great idea a couple of years ago about for gun violence, anti-gun violence group, where they invited some well-known gun advocates to speak to a graduating class, and essentially really amazing stunt the way they did it. They had them, essentially do a practice run, but they were filming that, and that was going to become the actual piece of communication. And so you had these well-known gun advocates speaking to over 3,000 empty seats at a graduation that over, I think it was 3,044 students would not be graduating that year due to gun violence. Super powerful. And obviously, like, I'm not saying you can't come up with that idea if you don't know the data point, but I guarantee you that the data points really do help unlock. And even the more specific they can get, that can actually contribute to a stronger insight.
Well, that's super powerful. So now we've done the brief, creatively used insights, put that into the brief, use that brief to create a solution, drafting something really powerful that makes an impact. What other stages in the creative process can data be used in?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously once work is created, there's different schools of thought on this, is when do you test it and how do you test it? I've experienced probably every different kind, where some people do lots of testing beforehand. They even create the work according to tests. They actually try to formularize it. I don't think that ever really leads to compelling work that, like I said, makes you feel that something. Like some friends of mine in the business have said for years, like, you want to make people laugh, cry, or wow. Like that's a great piece of work. It's going to be effective. Should do one of those things. I think when you add such a formula to it, where you're like, oh, we're going to do, this certain type of shot in the opening 3 seconds, and then we're going to have to show this much, things throughout, or we're going to have to super a number at the bottom of it the whole time. Like there's just a lot of things that I think may add to its quote unquote effectiveness, but at the same time make for a less compelling piece of creative. But that said, they can also do A/B testing through versioning. And I think if it's a campaign idea that truly has legs, you shouldn't be afraid of creating more versions. Ideally, that's the kind of thing where, like, you come up with a great campaign idea, you can write to that, till the cows come home, just like tons of solutions. So I think, and then that, it's like, okay, well, we found out this one's working better than that one, so we're going to put more media weight behind this. That completely makes sense. And then I think, even being able to hone in on a more specific audience, if you have work that's out there and you see that it's maybe driving a certain type of behavior, how does that affect things? I think a really great example was from last summer with the Grimace Shake, the work that McDonald's did, where there were a bunch of people and essentially they were saying, okay, it's my first time trying the Grimace Shake. Let's see how it's going to go. And they basically faked that they had died because of it. And it looked like a crime scene with the purple shake splattered all over them. I think McDonald's that wasn't supposed to last all summer, I don't believe. I think McDonald's kind of kept that going by making the shakes more available. They took this thing that was more of a limited time offer and extended it. And that to me that's data. That's like recognizing, like, this thing is working for us. How do we keep it going? How do we add more fuel to the fire?
Well, we're almost out of time, so I'm going to ask you one more question because I find this fascinating. And I apologize, it's probably kind of a curveball. So I'm curious to see kind of what your thoughts are around this. We've talked a lot about the data collection and putting that into the creative process. Let's say you're on the receiving end and there's this data point that leads to an insight, and you're trying to figure out how to creatively use that information to evoke an emotion or an action or something. What does the process look like? What should people really try to do? And maybe there's a ton of different processes and things like that, but how do you take that? Like, how do you inhale that data and turn it into something magical?
Sounds like a good party. But I think that's a great question. Again, for me, it's all about feeling. So if I hear something and I'm like, okay, you could probably tell me. I mean, I try to be a sponge as much as possible. It's something I learned when I was in college, kind of studying this stuff, was like, just expose yourself to as many things as possible, have as many influences as you can. You need to be a chameleon sometimes. You need to figure out, like, what's the order of the day. And I think, I don't know, part of it's just understanding, like, we hear something and it will jump out at you and you'll go, wow, I can't believe that. That's crazy. And if you want to see, like, one of the brands that I really admire that does this in a great way every year is Spotify with their Wrapped campaign. It's something every single user looks forward to. It's personalized for every single person, so no two look the same. It's really something that, to me, has like made its mark on culture repeatedly year after year. And sometimes it's really fun. They did like these great billboards a few years back where they gave shout outs to people who listen to certain songs the most in that neighborhood. It was maybe even like almost outing some, I guess what some people in the neighborhood might think is questionable taste. But I thought that was a really fun, amazing use of data. And they've really leaned into it in almost every piece of out of home that you see from them. And I think the ultimate goal of that, I believe, is to just make you feel that you're more part of that listener community. It strengthens that feeling.
Mark, again, these episodes go by quick. I love the insights. I love this idea of letting data drive insights that drives creativity. I love the process and the different stages. A ton to digest here. I think this is going to be a great episode. For anyone listening who would like to connect with you and further the conversation online, how and where can they find you?
Oh, thanks. My website is marksobiercreative.flywheelsites.com. Also, I'm on LinkedIn, so I'd be happy to, reach out, connect with anybody who's interested, and, would love to continue the conversation. And I think the only thing I would say about like data and creativity that's like a big watch out for me is don't let a hyper focus on data and short-term sales like lead to you neglecting like a long-term vision for the brand. An effective, confident brand really knows the power that it has. And they typically strike a great balance there between the two different types of work. And I think if you do have a great concept, people will embrace it and help make it more part of culture. It's something they'll remember. It's the equivalent of the thing they used to rip out and put up on the wall. It's basically why people buy Nikes. It's not because of the great deals that they have.
Super cool. And anyone listening, we will link to all of Mark's information in the show notes, so it's easy to find and connect with him. Again, Mark, thank you so much for the time and all of the insights today.
No, thank you, Ben. It's been great. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Content Amplified podcast. Please subscribe and leave us a review. And for additional ways to get more out of your content, visit our website at getmasset.com. That's getmasset.com. And tune in next time to the Content Amplified podcast.